Today, I invite you back to John chapter 21. Again, we will conclude this series on this day. But John chapter 21, we are familiar with this narrative. The disciples, a few of them, were fishing and had not caught anything after fishing all through the night. And Jesus raised the question, do you have any meat? Have you caught anything? They said no. And he says, cast your net on the right side of the ship. There are so many theological and spiritual implications from this passage. We could talk about trusting Jesus, submitting to Jesus, and look at it from that angle. But we have chosen to look at this from a more practical perspective, and that is that sometimes we're not getting anything, even though we have toiled and labored all night long. And the night doesn't necessarily represent a time of darkness. Sometimes the night just represents a time of feeling exhausted, a time of trying, a time of expending energy and effort. And we find that in so many aspects of our lives, all of what we're putting in, we're not getting the outcomes that we desire. As a result, we sometimes need to change our attitude. Sometimes we need to change our actions. And then today, we will talk about changing our associations. Change your attitude, change your actions, and change your associations. Let me begin this message by asking you an important question. And I don't want you to come to an answer quickly. This question should cause you to have some time to reflect and to process and to take into consideration the truest answer that you can conclude based on deliberate thinking about the question. This question is, what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about yourself? Have you been defined by your race? Have you been defined by your gender? Are you defined by skin color? Are you defined by your economic status? Have you been defined by the type of job you have? Have you been defined by your educational level? Sometimes people define you by your relationship status. Either you're married or you're not. If you're married, folk want to know, do you have a good marriage? If you're not married, why hasn't somebody married you, or why haven't you married anybody? Do you suffer in your self-esteem? Do you feel that in your life a sibling was, in your mind, the favorite child, and that has negatively affected how you see yourself? Are you always trying to prove that you are just as good as your sister or brother? Do you lack some talent and you don't necessarily feel the best about yourself because someone can outdo you in something? Did your marriage not work out? Or does your spouse not treat you with the honor and dignity that you desire? Are you struggling with the fact that you are not married and no one has chosen to accept your hand in marriage? Have you experienced failure somewhere that you've not been able to rise above? Are you upset that some organization did not accept you as a member? Some company did not hire you. Some boss did not promote you. Are you upset that somebody in the church somebody in your family, somebody somewhere did not accept you in their social circle? Do you see prominent people with an inner circle, and for whatever reasons, you've not been allowed in the inner circle? Were you put up for adoption? Were you abandoned by a parent? Have you experienced in life where you've been beat up, beat down? Have you found yourself emotionally abused? Do you feel that others have undervalued you and do not appreciate you? I've been preaching and dealing with folk long enough to know that the answer to these questions are not random, but are reflective of how many people feel about themselves. These questions reflect a crisis that is going on in the minds of many individuals who struggle with self-esteem and self-worth. And there is a correlation of what you believe about yourself and the outcomes of your life. When you have high self-esteem, when you have high self-worth, you aspire to greater, you try harder, and you believe that you're supposed to be successful, and you move toward greater effectiveness in your life. But when you do not feel the best about yourself, you will allow yourself to lower your standards, and you will accept anybody in your life, you will accept anything in your life, and you'll accept any outcome in your life, because it goes back to how do you see yourself? What do you believe about you? There are some problems with how we see ourselves. Number one is too often our self-esteem, our self-confidence, our self-worth is determined by somebody else. It's determined by how somebody else sees us, how somebody else values us, how somebody else appreciates us. But self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth are by nature, by definition, things that ought to exist not because of others, but because of self. Problem number two is that when our self-esteem and self-confidence and self-worth are not intact, we get stuck in a personal rut because we're waiting on others to assign us value. We're waiting on others to appreciate and validate us. And until they do, we are in this rut. We're in a ditch and can't get out. We can't move forward. But here is the greatest problem. And I want you to hear this if no one else has told you. Don't you know that you are royal? You are royalty. You are holy. You are esteemed highly in the Lord. You are favored and you are loved by the best. You don't need validation and affirmation from people when God has already determined that you are royal. Thus, the purpose of this sermon series. God's people need to learn to think the highest thoughts of themselves. This is not to make us arrogant or cocky, but to help us to have confidence and to know that it's okay for me to be me. And that without your approval, without your affection, without your affirmation, I am okay with me because I am a child of the King. I need to aspire to the highest in life because my God did not make me to accept mediocre outcomes. My God made me to be somebody. I am loved by him. I am esteemed highly by him. I'm favored by him. I'm declared forgiven. I'm declared royal. I am a child of the King. And I need to look to the supreme God for my love. For he is love. The Bible declares that God is love. So why do I look to people who struggle to even understand love to give me love when I can go to the source that God is love and learn what it means to be loved, to be affirmed, to be accepted, to be affectionately valued, because God, who is love, has declared that he loves me. And he loves me in the midst of my imperfections. He loves me even though I'm not all that I should be or all that I could be. And I need to feel good about me, and you need to feel good about you, because we look to the supreme God for our love, our security, and our confidence. That's why we've had this series about trying to get different outlooks and better outcomes in our lives. You should never accept anything less than what royalty deserves. You deserve the best because you serve the best. You deserve the best because you've been created by the best. You deserve the best because God, despite what man may have done and how man may have belittled you and how man does not value you, God has instilled within you purpose. God has a plan for you. God has a path for your life, and you ought not accept anything other than what God wants for you. And that's why we have to look at this passage and see that when we've been toiling in life, sometimes I have to change my attitude. I can't keep getting nothing and then have an attitude to defend the dysfunction in my life. I can't keep saying I need to fish on this side of the boat because my daddy fished on this side of the boat, and so one day I'm going to get a catch because this is the way it was done by my daddy, by my granddaddy, by my uncles, by my brother, so I'm going to stay on this side of the boat. No, I need to change my attitude and understand that sometimes I need to stop defending dysfunction and learn to think different and accept the fact that what I've been doing may not have been getting me the outcomes I desire. I need to change my actions. It's not what somebody else should be doing. It's what I can be doing for me. And then as we look at today, we have to sometimes change our associations. And when we talk about changing our attitude and our actions and who we associate with, that makes us uncomfortable. But you know, growth does not happen by being comfortable all the time. Sometimes we need to be uncomfortable. We need to take ownership of our choices and ownership of the outcomes of our lives. We cannot afford to pass the blame. We cannot wait for others to do what we can do for ourselves. Yes, we must expend effort and energy, but we have to do our part to get the outcomes that are more favorable. We must believe in a faith that will pay off. And when we get through coming to church and talking about how I got my praise on, when we get through going to church and we get through criticizing other people, at the end of the day, how does that functionally change my life? It's wonderful to get your praise on. It's wonderful to enjoy an emotional worship experience. It's wonderful, but if I'm not willing to change my attitude, change my actions, and change my associations, all the praise in the world is not going to change my life. When I get through criticizing other people and wanting to control and manipulate and have opinions about other people's lives, at the end of the day, how does that functionally change the outcomes of my life? I am more excited when I see people make improvements in their life than I am somebody saying, well, I had a good time in church today. Well, you can have a good time all day long, but if that good time does not lead to a change in attitude, change in actions, and change in associations, you're not going to see a change in your outcomes. So this message, this sermon series has been designed not to excite you in the sense of you just having a hallelujah good time, but to stir you and move you to ownership of who you are. As we look at this idea of changing associations, I want you to think about the fact that the passage teaches us in John chapter 21 that they're fishing all night long, they catch nothing. And here's the problem. These are experienced fishermen. If you're not happy with outcomes, if you're not satisfied with the outcomes, are you satisfied that you have the right people around you? If you're not satisfied with the outcomes of your life, are you satisfied that you have the right people around you? Let's look at this. Do you associate with people who keep you comfortable, or do you associate with people who will challenge you? Are you associating with people who agree with you, or are you associating with people who will give you the answers you need, even though they may not be the answers you want? Are you associating with people who are just examples of what not to do? Or are you associating with some folk who are examples of what to do? Consider this. In this fishing expedition, there are several disciples, all of whom have the same outcome: nothing. The Bible says in verse number 2, it was Peter, it was Thomas, it was Nathaniel, and the Bible says the sons of Zebedee. Who are the sons of Zebedee? According to Mark 3, verse 17, the sons of Zebedee are James and John. So we know by proper name there's Peter, Thomas, Nathaniel, James, and John. And the text also says, and two others. Now, most scholars agree that the reason the two others are not named is because the two others are likely not disciples who are a part of the original 12 disciples. And at this point, there's only 11 because we know what happened with Judas. So these two are not referencing someone who is a part of the 11, but are two disciples in the sense that they were other followers of Jesus who have less prominence in the scripture. Their less prominence does not mean that they have less importance to God. See, too often we worry about hearing our names because we think hearing our name makes us important. You don't have to hear your name to be deemed important by God. But for the sake of the passage, their names were not mentioned because they were less prominent figures in the overall bigger picture. Nonetheless, Peter, Thomas, Nathaniel, James, John, and these two other disciples, whoever they are all together, and it is clear that they are all fishing in the same side of the ship, because Jesus does not tell one or two of them to cast your net on the right side. He speaks to all of them. And so all of them obviously were on the left side, but they were not all on the right side. All of them was on the same side of the ship. When we are dealing with people, and all of us together, and we are collectively not getting desired outcomes, we need to ask ourselves, why is it that I am associating with people who are not getting anything more than what I'm getting? Now, I need you to hear me clearly because I don't want anyone to misunderstand the point or principles that we're trying to make. So often people conclude the most erroneous positions. I am not saying that the disciples needed to disband. That's not what I'm saying. I am not saying that the minute you get an attitude or you have an issue, you need to take your ball and run home. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that from a very practical application, what do we do when we associate with individuals who are failing as miserably as we are? Are they spiritually failing? Are they professionally failing? Are they failing financially? Is their family life suffering? At some point, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to disassociate from them, but it does mean that you might need to get in your circle somebody who can help you so that you and those around you don't keep getting the outcomes that you've been getting. At some point, you need somebody who can mentor you. At some point, you have to be secure enough in the fact that there is somebody who's outshining you. There's somebody who's smarter than you. There's somebody who's walking a few steps further than you and faster than you. There's somebody who can out-preach you, somebody who can out-pray you, somebody who can out-sing you, somebody who has a talent, a gift, or an ability that you don't have. Or they have it and they're doing better with it. There's somebody who's a better parent than you are. There's somebody who's doing better on their job. There's somebody who is doing better in their spiritual growth. There's somebody whose marriage is doing better than yours. There's somebody who's living the sanctified single life a little better than you. There is somebody who's financially may not be making as much money as you, but doing better with their finances. There's somebody whose health is better. There's somebody who is doing better at raising their children. At some point, when you are around people and everybody you are around are getting the same thing you are getting, which is an outcome that you don't desire, you might need to examine how you can pull some people in your circle to add to your life. We love dysfunctional circles. When my social circle is dysfunctional, I don't have to feel bad because nobody's doing better than me. So I don't have to face my insecurity. I don't have to admit my shortcomings. I don't have to address my faults because all of us are on a sinking ship together, and I feel good that you sinking with me. That is ludicrous and nonsense. That makes no logical sense to simply be okay with mediocre outcomes because you are around people with the same mediocre outcomes. People say to me all the time when I say this, when I preach this, when I provide this point in counseling, people say to me all the time, well, Brother Gibbs, I want to be around some folk that understand what I'm going through. What good is it to have somebody that understands your struggle but can't provide anything to strengthen you to get beyond the struggle? We just gonna all sit around saying, yeah, I understand you a failure. You understand I'm a failure. I understand you sad. You understand I'm sad. We just gonna be sad together and we gonna feel good because we all sad. Ain't nothing changing in my life. Ain't no circumstances improving. No outcomes getting better. I'm just as messed up today as I was the day before. But I just feel so good because you messed up too. That doesn't make good sense on any day. And it sure enough don't make sense now. Certainly we want people who have hearts of compassion. Certainly we want people who empathize with us. Certainly we want people in our lives who are able to give us that nurturing and that support that we need. We absolutely need that. But to allow ourselves to disengage from individuals who can add to our life because we are comforted by people who simply agree with us, people who simply coddle us, people that do not challenge us, people that tell us what we want to hear and not what we need to hear. We're going to keep getting what we've been getting. Now, let me ask you to think about some folk that you need to consider in your circle. 7 people that are, if these folk are in your circle, you might need to be aware. Now, I'm not going to tell you who your friends need to be and who needs to be in your circle. I'm just going to tell you 7 people in your circle to be concerned about. Number 1, insecure people. Now, everybody has some insecurities. But when we talk about insecure people, we're talking about people who have who are unable to think beyond their personal biases because they have an obsessive need for their own affirmation. See, some people can't help you because it ain't about you. It's always going to be about them. Have you ever been around somebody that when you try to tell your story, they turn it into their story? Have you ever been around somebody when you try to have your moment to shine, they need to outshine your moment? So you have to be careful about insecure people because they have the inability to think beyond personal biases because they have an obsessive need for their own affirmation. Second type of person you need to be careful about are irresponsible people. They are pure carelessness. They have absolute carelessness, and they have no responsibility to input and don't care about output. They're just careless. They go through life any kind of way. They're irresponsible, and an irresponsible person can't help you to be responsible. Third type of person is an irrational person. These are people whose suggestions, opinions, and perspectives have no sensible explanations. It follows no logic. There's no logical path to what they say. They're just irrational. And irrational people, the problem with them is that it makes sense in their head. It don't make sense to anybody else, but in their minds, it makes all of the sense in the world. You have to be careful about insecure people, irresponsible people, and irrational people. You have to also be careful about what I call institutionalized people. And these are people who are so stuck in one way, they never grow past that one way. All they ever know is the way it's always been. They're not open to anything else. When I worked in the secular realm and had to hire people, I always loved to hire people who had no experience in the job I was hiring them for. And that went against the guidance of the company because the company would always say, look to your competitors and look to people in the field who have a basic knowledge or basic understanding and hire them because you can build on that foundation. They have some fundamental understanding, and so you can can train them. And I found that for me personally to be disastrous, because what I found is that when you hired people in a particular industry and they had success somewhere else, you had to spend so much time deprogramming them and getting out of them. Now I didn't work for FedEx, but let me just use this as a practical analogy to make this point. Suppose that you work for FedEx and you needed to hire, and you got somebody who's been successful at UPS. And again, we're not criticizing either company. I'm just using this to illustrate a point. And so you're the FedEx hiring manager, and you hire somebody from UPS, and they may have done a great job at UPS, but then you hire them over at FedEx. Guess what? All they know is UPS. And so you're trying to ingrain in them the principles, the culture, the mission, the objectives, the statements, the idea of this is how FedEx runs, and all they know was at UPS, this is how we did it. And my question is, well, why are you trying to get a job with me at FedEx if UPS was so great? You might need to stay at UPS. And again, I'm not criticizing those companies. I'm only trying to make the point and to illustrate that sometimes people are so institutionalized to a particular pattern and a particular path that they can't grow, and they are stagnant in their own lives. And when they are stagnant, they can't help you to grow. So you have to be careful about insecure people, irresponsible people, irrational people, institutionalized people. And then you have to be careful about intuitive people. And the word intuitive simply means feeling. Now, there's nothing wrong in a general sense of being intuitive, but some people are only intuitive. That means they only go by what they feel. They don't seek knowledge. They don't seek information. They don't seek facts. They don't seek statistics. There's no rational basis on which they form their thought process. They just go by, I feel this way. I just go by how I feel, and because that's how they feel, they expect you to feel that way. The way that we see this play out is many times when people come in and they are arguing, whether it's in a relationship, two members in the church, two neighbors, whatever it is, people argue, this is how I feel. They don't argue facts. They don't argue statistics. They don't argue objective information. Their argument is, well, I feel. That's one of the reasons why people are not able to evangelize successfully, because when we're trying to teach people the Bible, we don't show, well, what does that book, chapter, and verse say? What do people argue? I feel. Well, I feel this is right because it was right for my grandmama and it was right for her mama, and so it's right for me. We're not asking you what you feel. What does book, chapter, and verse say? People argue intuitively, and they don't make good decisions. The sixth type of person that you have to be careful about are immature people. Immature people who are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually immature, their maturity is insufficient for you to go to the next level. And sometimes we don't go to the next level in life because we are around people who are just as messed up as we are, and they don't have the thinking, the skill set, the professionalism, the experiences, the perspectives, the insights to help us go to the next level because they have not matured to that point. So sometimes the people around us, we actually outgrow them. But what happens, because we love people that we've been comfortable with, we will often suppress our growth so that they don't feel uncomfortable with our growing. It's like having a light that is shining. And if I could use the analogy, they are a 20-watt light bulb, and we've been a 20-watt light bulb, and we've been comfortable with them. But God has impressed upon our hearts and has given us the vision and has instilled within us that you can be a 100-watt light bulb. And some people in our lives are so content to be a 20-watt light bulb, Or it may not be that they're content with that. It may be that God has not revealed to them, or they have not perceived that they could be 100-watt light bulb. And so in order to make them happy and to keep them from being uncomfortable, we dim our light so that they don't feel bad that they are not shining as bright as we are. But there comes a time that when you're trying to get a different outcome in your life, that you have to say, I've outgrown a social circle that maybe has not grown with me. That doesn't make you uppity. It doesn't make you bougie. It doesn't make you as a person that has your nose turned up in the air. There are times in which you outgrow people who have not themselves grown. If you're on this ship and everybody's fishing on this side of the ship, and we're not getting anything, and we've been doing this all night long, at some point you might have to outgrow that circle and say, I love you, I don't wish you any bad, and you're welcome to come on this journey with me, but all we're doing on this side of the ship is talking. All we're doing on this side of the ship is reminiscing. All we're doing on this side of the ship is we're entertaining each other, we're socializing, but I might need to move on so that I can be better, but I'm not excluding you from coming with me if you want to come with me, but I'm not going to stunt my growth if you desire to continue doing what you've been doing. Then the last type of person that we have to be careful about, in addition to insecure people, irresponsible people, irrational people, intuitive people, immature people, institutionalized people, are ignorant people. And I don't mean ignorant as a way to demean a person. I mean ignorant to use it in its proper definition. Ignorant means not knowing. There are people who simply do not have the knowledge or skill set to help you. I love watching television shows like Shark Tank and The Prophet, shows where people have an idea, a concept, and they are failing at it. And I find it interesting that they come before people who have proven success, people who have done what they're trying to do, people who have mastered their craft. And instead of taking sound advice and healthy advice, they keep trying to convince people, I want you to invest your money in what I'm doing. It's not getting me what I want, but I want your money in this. I need you to finance my dysfunctional thinking. And oftentimes you discover that they're listening to someone who they shouldn't be listening to because they might have a personal relationship, a personal connection, but they don't have the knowledge or the savvy to help them. We can enjoy people in our social circle, but when it comes to me trying to be a better person, a more spiritual person, a healthier person, I'm trying to better manage my money, I'm trying to be better on my job, I'm trying to be better in the church, I'm trying to be a better single person or a better married person, a better parent, I need to set my social circle aside and think about who has some information they can share with me that it might make me uncomfortable because I have to face my own insecurities. It may challenge me, but I've got to take ownership. I've got to be responsible for me. And I need to seek out the people. I need to change my associations. Well, how do you do that? Let me offer you, I told you 7 types of people you should not be around, or at least 7 types of people that you need to reconsider. I'm not going to tell you not to be around them, because some folks are, Brother Gibbs trying to tell me who my friend should be and who he think I am, or he is. I'm just as grown as him, and blah, 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 blah. And these have been my friends since kindergarten and all this other kind of stuff, because we get defensive about our dysfunction. So I'm going to let you choose what you want to do about your social circle. Think about insecure people, irresponsible people, irrational people, intuitive only people, immature people, institutionalized people, ignorant people. Those are people who we ought to be aware if they're in our lives. And certainly it is more likely than not that you have at least one, if not all of these people in your circle. Here are the type of people that you want to have in your life, and this will bless you as we talk about changing our attitude, changing our actions, and changing our associations. Number 1, you need to be okay with people who have different perspectives. You all remember in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11, that Paul says, "Bring John Mark, for he is profitable to me." 2 Timothy 4, verse 11, "Bring John Mark, for he is profitable to me." Now, remember in Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 40, you read that in your spare time, Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 40. You remember Paul and Barnabas, who were close, fell out about Mark. Now, in some sense, Barnabas may have had a bias toward Mark because he and Mark were blood relatives. So there's some lessons here. Be careful about being biased toward someone for reasons that in some sense are shallow. Now, I'm not saying family ought to just forsake family, but you don't accept foolishness from family just because they're family. If anything, the standard in the family should be higher, because when that person goes out into the world with the foolishness that we condoned in the family, the world is not going to be as kind. The world is not going to be as tolerant. The world is not going to be as forgiving. So we have to be careful that we don't have what could have been a bias on Barnabas's part to defend foolishness based on a bias. But what we learn also is that Mark, for reasons that are not mentioned in the scripture, that Mark chose to not be with them at another time. And because of this, Paul held this against Mark and said, I don't want Mark to go with us because he wasn't with me last time. He disagreed with me. He had a different perspective. He had another priority. And the Bible says in verse 39 of Acts 15, there was a strong contention between them. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, and Paul chose Silas and departed, and they went another way. Then you get to 2 Timothy 4:11, and who is Paul asking for? Bring Mark, because he is profitable to me. Here's the lesson that we learn from Paul. Just because someone disagrees with you or has a different perspective, it doesn't mean they are a bad person. Sometimes we act like the mafia, that when somebody disagrees with us, they got to go. We axe them off the list. They ain't no good. Do you know that a disagreement and a different perspective may make you a better person. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to agree with what you disagree about. You may not ever agree, but it's okay to have people in our lives who offer a different perspective. Number two, when you get time, read 2 Samuel chapter 23. It is a passage that I love in the Bible, as I do every passage in the Bible, but I love 2 Samuel chapter 23. Here's what you're going to discover when you read 2 Samuel chapter 23. There are a lot of people by name that we have no idea who these folk are. We don't have familiarity with their names. We can't pronounce half those names. We have no historical information about them other than some simple thought that is mentioned in chapter 23 of 2 Samuel. We don't know their family background, if they was married, if they had kids, what they did for a living. Many of these folk in 2 Samuel chapter 23, we don't know a whole lot about them. But here's why I like 2 Samuel chapter 23, and here's why this will bless your life. These are what's called David's mighty men. David's mighty men. Now, David was Israel's conquering king. David slew the giant Goliath. David slew the Philistines and the Amalekites and all of those other ites. David was a conqueror and brought victory to Israel. But guess what? David didn't do it by himself. David put men around him who were mighty, who could help him do what God had called him to do. You need to put some mighty men and women in your life. If you're not good with money, you need to have a mighty accountant, a mighty person in your life who can advise you financially. If you're not good with health, you need to have a mighty doctor. If you're not good with whatever you're trying to do in your life, you're not good at being married, you need to find some mighty married people. You're struggling as a single, you better find some mighty single people. You're struggling on your job, don't make fun of the person who's excelling and doing great. Those are the people you need to be having lunch with to find out how can I be what they want, what I'm trying to be and what God has called me to be. You've got to put some mighty people around you. You cannot be a conqueror by yourself. You need to have some sharp folk around you. You don't know the law, you better know a good lawyer. You don't know money, you better have a good financial advisor. You don't know health, have a good doctor. You don't know how to be a parent, you better look at somebody who's raised some responsible kids. Don't think that you have to do it all, and don't think you have to know it all. Put some mighty people around you. And then last but not least, not only is it okay to have people around you who have different perspectives, not only is it good to have mighty men or mighty women, people around you who can help you, who know what you don't know, who can do what you can't do, who are sharper than you, who can walk faster than you. You also need some people who can refresh you. And let me make this point, and the lesson is yours. In 2 Timothy 1 verse 16, Paul mentions something about a household that blessed him. In 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse number 16, Paul talks about the household of Onesiphorus. And he says, for he oft refreshed me. Time will not allow us to go into a meaning of the name Onesiphorus and what the word refresh means in the Greek, but let me just give it to you in very simple terms. Onesiphorus poured into Paul. Now here's the truth of the matter. Every day you wake up, you're pouring out some of you. You're pouring out on your job. You're pouring out in the church, you're pouring out in your marriage, you're pouring out in your kids, you're pouring out in any responsibility that you have. You pour some of yourself out every day. Who is pouring into you? Who is refreshing you? Who is strengthening you? Who is encouraging you? People say, Brother, I don't need nobody to do that. I just stick to myself, and I don't let nobody in my space and in my business, and you can't trust folk and all of that. And I've seen folk over the years say that, and I've seen the outcomes of their lives. And those are the same folk that when they break down, then they go to holler and ain't nobody there for them. Ain't nobody come through. And I've always done something for somebody. Ain't nobody called me. Ain't nobody sent me a card. Ain't nobody visited me. And my question is, how can you expect a social circle when you've been pushing folk away? See, you can't keep saying you don't need people and expect folk to keep gravitating towards you. You can't keep saying that you are a loner, or you keep to yourself, or you mind your own business, or you don't let nobody in your space, and then get mad when what you've been saying comes to fruition. If you a loner, you don't need anybody, you don't share your business, you keep to yourself. When you fall apart, when you break down, when life burdens you, when you're pressured, when you're stressed, when you're straining, when you're struggling, don't get mad when no one is there for you because you've been pushing people away. You don't get an Onesiphorus when you're down. You get an Onesiphorus who pours into you, who refreshes you before you are down, and because you have built social equity with them, when you are down, they have developed the love for you, the compassion for you, and the empathy for you that they are able to reach down and pick you up. They're able to pour into you because of what you built before you needed it. So be careful about dismissing people, and I don't need so-and-so, and I don't need, well, okay, the day's gonna come. And these are the folk who run to me, the preacher, or whatever preacher, and they mad because of what somebody else ain't done, and all they keep talking about is what they done for everybody else, and they don't realize their words and their actions have pushed people away from them. Be careful about pushing people away, because you can push them so far away that you can't pull them towards you when you need them. Let me conclude with this thought. I hope that you have enjoyed this sermon series. I hope that you see the value in taking ownership of our lives. If you're on the boat of life and you've been toiling all night long, not getting the outcomes you desire, maybe, just maybe, you need to think about changing your attitude. Maybe, just maybe, you need to think about changing your actions. Maybe, just maybe, you need to think about changing your associations. To keep doing what you've been doing is to keep getting what you've been getting. You are royal. You are somebody. People may not love you, they may not respect you, they may not treat you right, but you don't need affirmation, affection, and appreciation from people when you understand that you got it from God. And He's made you to be royal. Don't accept mediocrity. Don't accept mediocre. And don't allow your circle to cause you to dim your light because they're not shining. Aspire for the greatest. Live your life to the fullest. Exhaust your potential, because that's what God made you to be. With that, we close this message and this series. I hope that it has blessed you, and I hope that it will bless you, because I want to see all of us do the very best that we can do and be the very best that we can be. If you desire the prayers of the church, we will bid you to make those requests at the appropriate time. If you'd like to be connected to the church, if you'd like to give your life to the Lord, you can let us know at the appropriate time as we now prepare to sing as we continue our worship experience.